In the film industry, sequels are an inevitability. Some stories are unfinished, sometimes there are more stories to be told, but most of the time, it's about the money.
I'm talking about this.
When people realised that cinema is an art form and stopped throwing away films once they were done airing at the movie theatre, more movies started being made, and the art of filmmaking was held in a much higher regard. With the respect of filmmaking starting to rise, also began an epidemic of numerous franchises featuring a catalogue of content which spanned over numerous years. Some franchises deserving the time dedicated to them, others should have spent more time with their families. But because every creative filmmaker wants to chase the bag and turn their niche standalone movie into an expanded universe, it has created a saturated market, and one filmmaker who wants to cash in is Rian Johnson with Knives Out. After Knives Out was released back in 2019, Johnson realised his movie was a financial success and healed his filmmaking credibility after the sinking ship that was The Last Jedi. So he thought, let's make another one. And he did just that with the release of Glass Onion, which was a Netflix original. Personally, I'm surprised Netflix still has money to throw.
Because this is what it's all about. Right? Motherfucking cock-sucking money. Here.
As well as Johnson, Netflix also saw the potential of a Knives Out franchise and bought the rights to it, which allowed Glass Onion to be made. And I feel as if Glass Onion fumbles as a sequel to Knives Out. While it does feature the fan favourite character of Benoit Blanc and is also a very non-traditional mystery story, it misses the mark in so many aspects. But before that, let's talk about genre theory. Now, genre is something that fascinates me, as nerd-emoji-like as that sounds. The building up and breaking down of tropes and conventions over numerous decades makes me admire the creativity of filmmakers from both the past and present, and with the persistent use of certain tropes as well as the occasional diversion from said tropes, genres are simply defined by repetition and difference. Due to every genre having their own sets of tropes and conventions that are both repeated and deviated from, my focus will be on the murder mystery genre, and the tropes present within the films that reside in this genre are almost endless, so let me boil it down to a few notable staples of the genre. This is the trope that basically created the whodunit mystery, where we have a group of characters with one victim, and this group of characters all have enough reason to have wanted the victim dead. We've seen this trope in media such as Murder Mystery, another film where Adam Sandler plays the exact same character for the 15th time. Usually the main character of the mystery film as such, the story is often told from their POV. We witness them interview suspects, gather clues, and eventually solve the mystery at hand. This trope is prevalent in films such as Death on the Nile and Murder on the Orient Express, where Detective Poirot guides the audience through the story from his analytical perspective. We get to see his highest highs, thought process, as well as his moments of vulnerability and confusion. This trope traditionally occurs within the third act, where the aforementioned keen detective lays the pieces and unravels the true nature of the crime committed to both the audience and the characters. This trope serves to bring a satisfying conclusion to the mystery, often by highlighting details of the plot, rewarding keen-eyed viewers for noticing and spelling out the mystery for less observant audience members. Often these details unmask plot twists, as well as wrapping up the film in a nice bow. When executed well, it leaves the audience with a sense of fulfillment. Now this is an interesting trope as it creates a source of conflict and complication when the victim was a bit of an unpleasant person. Due to their nature, it doesn't make it easy to narrow down the culprit and the suspect's motivation. The trope plays out and See How They Run, when the first victim, an American director by the name of Leo Kopernik, picks a fight with one of the theatre actors and has numerous disagreements with the writer of his upcoming movie. The film is typically set within some kind of grand or remote setting, like a stately mansion in the country, a yacht in international waters, a private island, or a transcontinental train. These settings are the stomping grounds of those in the highest echelon of wealth and influence who portray themselves as holier than thou. But in reality, a lot of depraved deeds occur behind closed doors.
Yeah, he was in the bathroom, joylessly masturbating to pictures of dead deer.
Just like the real world. That's what makes these settings and characters so compelling. These kinds of settings appear in films such as Clue, Gosford Park, and today's topic, Knives Out. When it comes to Knives Out's greatness, there are too many things to really consider, so allow me to dilute my appraisals down to a few key elements: subverting genre tropes, subverting audience expectation, and characterization. These three key aspects of Johnson's project play a pivotal role in what makes it so great. Now, Johnson is a filmmaker who is no stranger to plot twists and subverting the audience's expectations, for better and for worse.
They were nobody.
They were filthy junk traders.
sold you off for drinking money.
And Johnson's decisions to subvert expectations have been chalked up to him just wanting to be cool and quirky, which I guess is kind of valid considering The Last Jedi example, since there was a complete lack of foreshadowing and believability for these things to occur in the world Star Wars takes place in. From the outset though, Knives Out seems like your traditional whodunit story. Someone seemingly gets murdered, there are numerous suspects who could have done it, all with reasonable motives for killing the victim, and a detective is there to investigate the crime at hand. Then, the tables turn. During the transition between the first and second acts, we are shown how Harlan Thrombey's death truly played out. Marta, Harlan's nurse as well as the least likely culprit, is revealed to have supposedly killed Harlan via a morphine overdose. This alone immediately subverts the aforementioned big reveal and keen detective tropes, and weaponizes them against her, transforming the film from a whodunit to a how is she going to get away with it. I think this works well because the vast majority of the narrative is told from Marta's POV. As well as this, when Fran discovers Harlan's body, we cut to none other than Marta. I may be reading too much into this, but that choice feels like foreshadowing for a future payoff, and that payoff we certainly got. Part of why this is so compelling is because of who Marta is. She's a gentle and good-natured person, with a literal gag reflex to dishonesty. For the majority of the film, Marta isn't in her comfort zone, and this is what makes us root for her to succeed. She isn't a complete psychopath, and she doesn't want to play this game, but she must. This game has stakes. If Marta is found out, then her undocumented mother will be deported, which will break their small family apart. A prime example of Marta not wanting to play the game is the scene where she discovers Fran in the abandoned building. At this point, Marta believes she's found the person who's been blackmailing her, and the believed blackmailer is essentially moments away from death. If Marta was playing the game as intended, she would have left Fran for dead, but she doesn't. She calls an ambulance and has Fran taken to the hospital. Once at the hospital, Blanc is informed that Ransom spilled the beans.
Serious about this stuff.
Telling Lieutenant Elliot and Trooper Wagner about the medical error, but instead of getting angry at Ransom, Marta requests Blanc to round up the Thrombeys at Harlan's house so she can apologize.
Cooper, I have no idea how I'm gonna record this video, dude.
Where rather than letting her apologize, Blanc reads the toxicology report and pulls her away. Marta, obviously confused by Blanc's actions, questions them, as opposed to viewing them as Blanc giving her an out. Because as well as subverting genres, Johnson also subverts the audience's expectation. Since Ryan essentially showed us who killed Harlan Thrombey at the end of the first act, the audience is led to believe that this is the conclusion to the narrative's mystery element, instead taking a sharp left turn into the thriller genre. However, the film's resolution reveals that it was Ransom who switched Harlan's Toradol and morphine, along with taking away the naloxone, in order to guarantee the success of his plan. But instead of a medical error, we get this. The way Ransom's reveal is built up and foreshadowed is very Enfixing, and it all goes back to dogs. Throughout the film's 2-hour runtime, the way each character interacts with the two German shepherds is integral to deciphering the true mystery of the movie, which we all know that Ransom was the true culprit in this scenario, and Johnson foreshadowed this brilliantly, and it's not just because of the detail he's utilized, but also the order in which he laid out the clues. We have Meg being woken up by the dogs barking at 3 AM. Later, the dogs don't stir as Marta sneaks through the night. We see how excited the dogs are when Linda arrives at the Thrombey household. We see the dogs play fetch with Blanc. Then once Ransom arrives, they are clearly worked up. With all these clues lined up, Johnson has essentially revealed to us that Ransom is the killer. These subtle details are things you'd be unlikely to notice on the first viewing, but on the rewatch, you'll be pointing out all these subtle details and coming to the realization that no one else apart from Ransom could have done this. Another reason as to why this plot twist is so compelling is that it makes up for a previous seemingly broken promise. When you're writing a story, the writer makes promises to the reader or viewer, and in the context of Knives Out, Rian Johnson promised us a murder mystery, but that fizzles out because he seemingly gave us the answer of who done it. Breaking the original promise. So we have the murder mystery plotline and the Marta getting away with it plotline, with both of these plotlines getting a resolution during Benoit Blanc's monologue in the third act. The resurrection of this broken promise was quite fantastic to see, as it revealed that another devious actor was lurking around in plain sight, which creates a brilliant and satisfying climax. In addition to subverting genre tropes and audience expectations, Johnson does some great character work, not just of the main characters like Marta, Ransom and Harlan, but the side side characters too, including the rest of the Thrombey family. We have Joni, Linda, Richard, Meg, Jacob, and Walt.
Sussy baka.
All of these people are caricatures designed to stir the pot within the narrative and allow the stacked cast to bounce off of each other, giving us the brilliant performances we'd expect from actors of this caliber. There's Joni, a lifestyle guru who portrays herself as holier than thou, when in reality, she's a fucking whore who only sticks by her deceased husband's family because of their wealth. Linda, the big cheese of a real estate company who talks about how self-made she is, while leaving out the fact that she got started with $1 million loan. Richard, the closeted racist who lives in fear of his wife, yet has the goal to cheat on her with his secretary. Meg, a leftist who seems very compassionate and caring when she doesn't have to actually do anything. #activism. Jacob, an alleged alt-right troll and future supporter of Kanye West's presidential campaign. And finally, Liz Walt, the unaccomplished son who essentially rode off of the back of his father for a career. They aren't exactly a pleasant bunch, with the film doing a very efficient job of portraying this to the audience, providing us with what is essentially a 20-minute compilation of them all lying and throwing each other under the bus.
Yeah, this one's going in my cringe compilation.
Which causes the viewer to come to the conclusion that these people are very prickly, pompous, and self-absorbed. However, despite being caricatures, they also feel like genuine people. When Linda is skimming through her letters from Harlan and expressing distraught, we can't help but feel bad for her, especially when Walt comes in to comfort her. They are real people with real emotions, grieving their father's loss. If Knives Out were a normal murder mystery, the Thrombeys would have been leeches who were essentially praying for Harlan's demise, in order to get their piece of the inheritance. And as we know, Knives Out is no traditional murder mystery. Seeing Linda truly grieve the loss of Harlan makes the viewer realize that yes, these people are very bad people, but they have their own feelings and emotions. The human element to these archetypal characters is what makes seeing them on screen so engaging. Witnessing their banter, conflict, and collusion is very infixing to see, but this human element also helps the writer achieve the purpose of these characters, for them to get under your skin, since they are bad people who could potentially be good, but they choose not to be, and the reason behind that is crippling insecurity. Linda wants to be recognized as this self-made businesswoman, but is too insecure to reveal how she started up. Joni wants to be perceived as a wise, thoughtful, and morally upstanding, because of an inherent fear of being seen as anything less. Walt desperately wants to make his father proud, but lacks the self-belief to accomplish anything of his own, so he relies on his father's success for a career, adjacent to his father's wishes. This ensemble of characters have molded themselves into these caricatures because of an inherent anxiety of not being viewed as a worthwhile member of society.
Get what you fucking deserve!
It's almost like a game, and the word game is thrown around a lot in Knives Out, especially by Harlan himself. I guess you could say he was a gamer. During the scene where Lieutenant Elliot is questioning Linda, she mentions that you had to find a game to play with Harlan in order to communicate with him, which conveys an emotional distance between Harlan and his children, a distance he's tried to compensate with financial support. And this sense of emotional distance has unintentionally morphed the Thrombeys into these self-absorbed and pessimistic people who are trying to win the game of being seen as worthwhile members of society. This may not even be done out of a desire to win per se, but instead a desire to not lose. They have this immensely flawed worldview where they interpret life's challenges as wins or losses. This game-like mentality is fitting because during Harlan's final moments, he places an unwilling participant into the center of his game. The massive amounts of depth that Rian Johnson placed into these characters is very admirable, considering they aren't even considered main characters. But now that I've discussed what I adored about Knives Out, let's take a reluctant bite out of Rian Johnson's glass onion. What usually comes with sequel films is that the sequel in question is usually perceived as better than its predecessor, but that isn't the case here with Knives Out and Glass Onion, as I've demonstrated that the former is some of Rian Johnson's best work as both director and screenwriter. Yet Rian has seemingly regressed with the release of Glass Onion. While there are a multitude of reasons as to why people would dislike the film, my critiques have been watered down to time with my previous appraisal of Knives Out, subverting audience expectation, characterization, as well as the addition of Johnson's unfocusedness. This lack of focus comes from Rian's vision as to what Glass Onion is supposed to be. The general audience and Rian Johnson see this film as a quote-unquote dumb mystery, and I'd be inclined to agree if Johnson was honest with the audience.
This man lies!
The whole shtick of a film like this is that a good portion of the clues need to be hidden in plain sight, so the audience can play along with the mystery as well as the characters. If you miss something, that's okay. It'll be presented to you outright when the sleuth detective lays out everything in the third act, but with our transparent vegetable here, it becomes more translucent. If you miss something, it is explained to you at the climax, once you've gone past all the dishonest editing, the late inclusion of information which is pivotal to the overarching plot, and the interjection of missing scenes which loosely tie in with what has been shown prior.
That doesn't seem fair.
It's very clear that Ryan isn't playing fair. This is because he also doesn't know if he wants to make a dumb mystery or something cool and clever like Knives Out, so he thought he'd try both. And as well as a lack of focus in Johnson's vision, there's a lack of focus in tone, as the film is riddled with what I'd like to call Marvel humour, which is either a reference to pop culture or a joke with a supposedly subversive punchline.
How about another joke, Murray?
No, I think we've had enough of your jokes.
And these kinds of jokes aren't the issue. You can pull off Marvel humour and have it actually be funny, as long as you use it sparingly. Knives Out had a lot of jokes which related back to popular culture. Why these jokes work in Knives Out is because of both the character dynamics portrayed in the film, as well as the frequency of the humorous elements. The comedic elements are used scarcely enough to almost always catch you off guard, mostly landing well, while in Glass Onion, the jokes are abundant. Unfortunately, due to the lackluster character writing and dynamics, they don't hit very well with the audience. Because one of the main details I adored from Knives Out are its characters, such as the Thrombey family, Ransom, Marta, and Helen. Ryan did an incredibly good and efficient job at providing depth to them, but both the depth and efficiency has gone out the window. Since Ryan elects to spend the first hour and a half to establish these characters, so allow me to do it in a minute or so. We have Miles Bron, tech billionaire, certified nerd emoji, and Elon Musk parody.
Miles Bron.
Duke, manosphere orbiter.
Pussy's just like an open wound.
A more jacked Andrew Tate with a cuckold fetish, who gets claimed by the Matrix thanks to his pineapple allergy. Andy, an independent woman who don't need no man and potentially Miles' scorned lover. Claire, bought and paid for Democrat governor. Birdie, dumb blonde. Whiskey, dumb blonde 2, Electric Boogaloo, and Lionel, Bill Nye the Science Guy. And while I've given them interesting descriptions, they aren't anywhere near that compelling, at least nowhere near engaging enough to allocate half of your film's runtime to them.
You're trying to be as economic as possible in terms of the storytelling.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Because Ryan doesn't imply any semblance of depth to these characters, apart from the fact that Miles is making them all do something they don't want to do. Applying this fact to each character does give them a reason to want Miles dead. Take that away, and these people are incredibly shallow and vain. But that's okay. If anything, it is a staple of the whodunit genre, which is why a sleuth detective usually fills the spotlight as he tries to figure out the mystery. The side characters in Glass Onion are what the Thrombeys would have been without any semblance of emotional depth. Then there's our main cast of Andy/Helen, I'll get back to that, Benoit Blanc, and Miles Bron. When it comes to Helen, it seems to me that Ryan is wanting to morph her into this Marta Cabrera archetypal role. He does this by trying to make her seem as noble and sympathetic as possible, with the whole quest for justice that she embarks on after Andy's death. However, this noble intent completely disappears once it's established that Helen dislikes the Disruptors. Whether it be the numerous times she refers to them as shitheads, or her ridiculous amount of insight into the legal battle between Andy and Miles, either way, Helen is doing the right thing but with the wrong intentions. Evident by her desire to ruin and fuck over Miles, she does succeed in her objective, yet she gets no justice for Andy, demonstrating to me at least that Helen didn't really care about justice, but was rather out for spiteful revenge. Helen wasn't forced into doing this by anyone, she's doing this out of her own fruition, and there were no stakes for her. If she hadn't taken on this mission to get justice for Andy, not much about the status quo would change. Miles would still be rich, but would inevitably get fucked over because of Clea, taking both Lionel and Claire down with him. Birdie would be brought down by the whole Sweetie Pants debacle, and Duke would more than likely fade into obscurity or say one too many gamer words on stream.
What a fucking...
With Blanc though, he is a lot more present in the narrative than he was in Knives Out. Due to his prominence in the story, I've come to realise that Blanc isn't that interesting of a character. There's little to no insight given to the audience about Blanc in either installment, apart from the fact that he's well known, a bit of an outsider, a pursuer of truth, as well as being in possession of a race-car brain and a quirky accent. Along with these traits, we do get some semblance of insight into how he operates as a detective from this line.
I need danger, the hunt, the challenge. I need a great case.
From this, we can conclude that Blanc is not a detective who pursues justice, rather he pursues intellectual stimulation, which contradicts his presentation in Knives Out. This is both a selfish and inherently flawed philosophy behind Blanc's work as a detective, and with this philosophy in mind, I believe that Glass Onion is supposed to challenge/disrupt Blanc's ideology, but in an immensely flawed way. It might have been a much better disruption to Blanc's principles if Helen had actually died when Miles shot her. This would demonstrate to Blanc that his pursuit of intellectual stimulation is putting people in harm's way. Instead, it's Blanc being so smart that Miles's unintelligence was under his nose the entire time.
It's so dumb.
With dumbness in mind, we can discuss our antagonist, Miles Bron. The whole gimmick that comes of his character is that wealth doesn't equal intelligence, and it's executed relatively well, as it shows that he rode off of Andy's ideas to achieve success, as well as using the wealth he acquired to get more intelligent people to do tasks for him. Some of these tasks being to commit perjury. But this lack of intelligence is a clear insecurity, making up for it by using big words to portray himself as the smartest man in the room. This is an interesting character archetype that Rian has conjured up, but the issues start to come in when you realize that the plot hinges on Miles's inconsistent intelligence. The objective of the film is for Helen to find Andy's napkin. Now, she doesn't know if it even is on the island, let alone still intact. It's just assumed to be still intact because Miles is a bit of a goofy goober. However, once Miles is confronted with the napkin, he burns it. Why didn't he burn it before? Why wait until it's presented right in front of him to get rid of it? At best, this is a plot contrivance. At worst, it's a plot hole. No matter which term you use to classify this action, it's a definitive example of inconsistent characterization, which significantly affects the plot. Yet the big foreshadowed twist of the film is Miles's idiocy. This isn't the twist Rian should have been focused on. Instead of putting so much thought into Miles's dim-wittedness, Johnson should have gotten his priorities in order and honed in on the sister switcheroo. The actual big twist of the film is that Andy isn't actually Andy. Before the film even begins, a murder has taken place, with the victim being the actual Andy. Turns out Andy had an identical sister named Helen, who was under the correct impression that Andy hadn't killed herself. So she googles Benoit Blanc and it somehow comes up with his full docs? I'd personally get that sorted. Once she's at his house, she enlists his help, he obliges, and decides to pull a few strings to get the news of Andy's death delayed. Job's a good one. Apart from the fact that there was no inclination of these events occurring prior. One thing people appreciate about whodunits is watching back to see how you were tricked, picking up on clues and foreshadowing that you missed during your original watch through. With Glass Onion, you were certainly tricked, and any rewatch will reveal that there was no foreshadowing of the sister switcheroo. After seeing what Rian has cooked up here, I imagine that Chekhov grabbed the gun and turned it on himself. For any good twist to be functional, it needs to have both the appropriate foreshadowing and a great payoff. As I stated prior, one of the main ways Knives Out foreshadowed that Ransom had killed Harlan was their use of the dog's behaviour. Meg was woken up at 3 AM due to the dogs barking, the dogs don't bark at Marta when she returns to the Thrombey household, and the only person the dogs dislike is Ransom. Whereas there's almost no foreshadowing for the sister switcheroo. I'm saying almost no foreshadowing to be charitable, because there is one offhand piece of dialogue said by Claire, where she declares that Andy on the island has changed. It's incredibly vague and isn't enough, but I am trying to be fair. However, that fairness goes out of the window because that line is removed once the twist has been revealed to the audience. A couple of different scenes are recontextualized post-reveal. Example A being the scene where Andrew Tate watches his girl get railed by Elon Musk. In the original, we witness Blanc spying on Duke, and post-reveal, we see both Blanc and Andy spying on Duke. Putting these two scenes side by side shows that you'd have no idea that Andy was even there in the first place. Example B is the scene where Claire is watching Andy stumble away. Post-reveal, we get to see a conversation between the two of them and Duke, where they discuss the events which took place on the night of Andy's murder, where Bizarro World Andy seems foggy about the events of that night. If this scene, as well as part of Example A, was shown before the sister switcheroo reveal, there would have been some foreshadowing. The more intelligent members of the audience would question why Blanc and Andy are in cahoots with one another, as well as questioning why Andy's memories are foggy. While it might not be very good foreshadowing, it would be better than what we got, and Chekhov would still be with us. To conclude this essay, I'd like to say that I don't believe that Rian Johnson truly understood what made Knives Out so good. It wasn't just the twists and turns, it wasn't just the subversions of genre tropes, but it was the attention to detail so all of those things could be seamlessly interwoven into the narrative. It seems to me that Glass Onion was just an empty metaphor to tell the audience how empty and piss poor this film is, as both a successor to Knives Out and a whodunit. With a third Knives Out movie in the works, I can't say that I'm looking forward to it, especially if the releases are going to have inconsistent quality. I'd rather have consistently bad movies rather than playing Russian roulette with a writer and director. Some might try and counter that point by saying, don't judge a book by its cover, but you would be a liar if you didn't have preconceived notions about the quality of an upcoming cinema release, based on either the writer, director, the cast, or the studio involved in said film. One thing I mentioned before is that Ryan seemed very indecisive on what he wanted Glass Onion to be, and I believe that ties in with his general lack of understanding of what made Knives Out so great, because the audience didn't fall in love with Benoit Blanc or the twists themselves. Instead, the audience was infatuated with the storytelling intelligence present whilst Rian Johnson crafted these twists and turns. Johnson only acknowledged the twists themselves rather than their build-up, and the sooner Johnson learns this lesson, the better, because I don't want to have to walk on eggshells when it comes to watching a movie written and directed by Rian Johnson. Anyway, I've been Enfixed, and I am a pretentious nobody.